Welcome to For the Love of Books, Bees Books Edition, a podcast by North Lanarkshire Libraries.
Hello, this is Pari.
And this is Jenny, and we're here to talk about
Bees Books.
Oh, we're getting used to that. We're getting good.
So, it I think sinks in really well with the theme of the week, which is enthusiasm will take you far. Our synchronized enthusiasm has taken us far.
It has, yes.
Yes, so I would love to know what your contributions to be this time.
I'm quite excited to talk about this for many, many reasons. But it is The Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Maas.
That's how you pronounce it.
She has two A's. I'm saying Maas. I don't know. There's no...
But
Maas.
you know, MESS is also pronounced Maas. So do you think there's a difference between MAAS and MESS?
Yes,
Maas.
Who knows? I'm putting 3 A's in there actually. But anyway.
And that's a beautiful cover as well.
It is a beautiful cover.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful cover. What have you chosen?
So I have a book and a TV show as my contribution. So my book is called The Overstory by Richard Powers, and my TV show contribution is called The Change, and it stars Bridget Christie, who is one of my favorite comedians. Only I know her through Taskmaster, another show that I love. And it has layers of the theme, I think, layers of enthusiasm. One of which is, in this book, they're all very enthusiastic about trees.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying this new thing this year, which is I want to read one book outside of my comfort zone every month, because I read a lot. And I tend to stick to my favored genres and formats and whatever. So this was very out of my comfort zone. The Change, they're also quite enthusiastic about trees. Well, she is. They're also enthusiastic about eels.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
It's very different. And me, I am recovering from the flu.
Yeah.
So my enthusiasm is also going to have to take me to the end of this episode. So multiple layers of the theme there.
I have to say it's very strange seeing you kind of Jeremy and so
I might have a coughing fit. I'm not infectious, just to let you know. I practice safe library health and safety. So I'm not going to infect anybody who's coming into the library today. Or am I? I'm not. I'm not.
Well, okay.
So tell me about your book.
So I don't know if you've ever seen it. We both like science fantasy kind of books. It's that kind of a thing. So my enthusiasm has made me, in the last week, read the first book, read the second book, which I finished this morning, and started the third book immediately. I have read them straight away through.
Very enthusiastic.
So I had seen this book, because it has a beautiful, beautiful cover, quite a lot, and thought, and then somebody handed them in as donations. So I snaffled the first one before we added to our stock. And read it, started it just beginning of last week, and went right through it, absolutely right through it straight away. And as I say, the second one, which is always the case with books, the second one is a lot thicker than the first one.
Yeah.
And as I say, I started.
This is significantly thicker.
Yes.
The second book. But I've always I've seen this, and I've heard I've heard things about it. I don't know, good or bad things, but I've always been sort of curious, but not enough to commit, because it's quite a commitment, isn't it?
Yes.
So tell me about the series. What did you love about it?
Apparently it was supposed to be a trilogy, and like her favourite Tams, and it's kind of went on a bit.
They tend to do that.
And I think you can tell in the second book that obviously by that book she had a lot more to say.
Right.
And perhaps by that book she was like, this is going to be a wee bit more than that. So, and I haven't heard really anything about it at all. I've seen it pop up on things, but I've never read anything about it. So I didn't know what to expect. And just so that people know, the cover is kind of bright red, and it's just half of a person with swirly tattoos and swirly thorns and things like that. It's lovely. So I didn't even read the back of the book before I delved into it. So I had nothing at all. All I read was, she stole a life, now she must pay with her heart. And I was like, all right, okay. Intense. And obviously being fantasy readers, I thought, actual heart. Well,
I did think of that as well. Okay.
But basically it is a human, and they live on a very large island, And the bottom half of the bottom tiny bit of the island is humans, and the rest of it are fairies, but not fairies like Tinkerbell, and not fairies like that kind of a thing. They're basically they're just kind of immortal beings who do all the stuff that humans do, but on a bigger scale year-wise. So things last 500 years as opposed to just, a couple of years. So when they go to war and things like that. So you kind of put in with the main character called... Now, I did mispronounce her name for the whole of the first book, and it wasn't until the end of the first book it gives you a pronunciation guide, and I went, oh. So I might say it 2 different ways, but I think her name is Freyru. No, it's not. It's Feyru. Feyru. In my head, she was something completely different. It's fine.
Faye, you could call her Faye.
She is from now on. Well done. So she's a human, and her family are very poor through circumstances, and she's the one that has to go out and hunt for food and things for her dad and her 2 sisters. And she accidentally kills a fairy who has come over the wall. So there's a wall separating the two people, which you kind of learn afterwards is being put up after there was a big war and humans were slaves and all this kind of stuff. So this fairy, as a big wolf comes through, she kills him, skins him, and sells his pelt, and gets food for the family. And then a few days later, another fairy comes in, and basically she's killed a fairy and she has to forfeit her life, basically. But the character that comes, Tamlin, comes along and takes her to his court. So the fairy empire is separated into different courts. So there's a summer, a winter, an autumn and a spring court. There's a night court, a day court, and something else which I can't remember because we've not visited it yet. But spring court is the one that's right across the wall from the humans, and this is where Tamlin comes from. So he takes Faye back to his court, and then exciting things happen, which I don't want to spoil too much for you, but basically there is bad stuff happening in the fairy realm, and some of the fairies want to get into the human realm again to enslave them and things like that, and there's some fairies that are trying to stand against this, and there's a very big scary fairy lady who lives under the mountain in a kind of horrible debauched court where everything nasty happens, and our main character eventually ends up there, and
of course,
yes she has to do 3 tasks to try and free people and things like that. I'll not spoil it too much, but immediately I liked the main character. Straight away, as soon as you kind of meet her, I really liked her, and I wanted to know what happened to her. And then I kind of wanted to know what happens to her sisters. And then as soon as she was in the fairy court, I was like, I need to know everything here. It was just, it's really, really well written as well. I loved the second book. I liked the first book very much, but the second book really kind of cements everything in. You learn a lot more about what's going on. The people that you thought were goodies are not so good. The people that you thought were baddies are not as bad as you think. And it's just wonderful. The only thing I would say about it is, just to warn you, there's quite a lot of adult content in it, quite a lot of naughty bits in it. If you're not into that, you can skip over it. I'm not adverse to a bit of romance, and because of the story, you do need that for it to make sense. But I felt as if there was maybe a little bit too much of that in it. But as I say, you can skip over it, so it's fine.
See, I am very anti-romance in general. So for me, the adult content, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. But the romance,
Oh no, the romance is very it's integral to the story because it explains why she does certain things, and then when you learn something else that somebody's not been perhaps as honest with her as they should have been, why things change. I'm being very cryptic, sorry.
Yes,
I want you to read it. But it's very, very good. And as I say, I start later today, and so I sat on my couch and I finished off the second book, And then, because I had to, I read the first 2 chapters of the 3rd book.
Oh, of course.
Because although it was left on a cliffhanger, you kind of suspected where that cliffhanger was going to go.
Right.
But I was still like, no, I need to know that that's where it goes, and it's fine.
So how many books are there in this series?
So I think there's 5, and there's also a colouring book now.
Oh,
yes,
of course.
Yes. When you look it up on like Fantastic Fiction or whatever, and it shows you the order everything comes in the middle there is the Court of Thorn and Roses colouring book. And now I'm slightly nervous that I should read that because it might have something
some
in it.
secret information.
Yes.
You know, this sort of sounds like another thing we're really enthusiastic about, both of us, tying it into the theme even more layers. Reimagining, because, you know, what you were saying, Tamlin, did you say?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a whole canon about that, isn't there? Like in Scottish and British folklore, like the fairy kingdom, and even the wall that you said. Like, I've read versions of stories about the wall dividing the fairy kingdom from the human kingdom, and earlier they used to be more connected, maybe not as slaves, but or maybe, I don't know. And there's always something, like, we enter the story at a time when somebody is like, again, maybe not killing a wolf or a fairy, but they go into the other kingdom and then figure it out, and they're there for ages and then come back changed or whatever.
Well, that's what there was a part in it when she comes back to see her family, and obviously if like some of the tales would be she'd be away in there for years and she'd come back and it'd only be a day on her own and things like that. There wasn't any of that. It was the same amount of time going in one and the other. But I love the different courts. So we've had a lot of spring court, and a lot of, not to give too much away, night court, and under the mountain, which is kind of in the middle where the evil person lived. But you get hints about the other ones as well, and basically in the night court it's not night all the time. The sun still goes round, but their places become bigger at night. In the spring court it's always spring, so basically it can be summer or winter somewhere else, but they've still got all their daffodils and their things like that, which I quite like. If I was going to live anywhere, it would be maybe the spring court, because it's not too hot, it's not too cold, things like that. But I
always wonder though, because obviously, like, I'm from India. This is not to do with the book, it's to do with what you just said, spring. Like, I feel like I love spring. It's my favourite season here ever since I moved here to Scotland, because I feel like I've earned it after the horrible darkness of winter. I don't know if I would love it as much if it was spring all the time. So that's more maybe a philosophical conundrum for when my brain is actually functioning and not riddled by the flu. But no, it sounds really intriguing, and I think you've sold me on it a bit, because I love the idea. So the romance and adult content, but I love the idea of the world building, like all these different courts and like politics within all the different worlds.
You'd like it for that, because there's a lot of rivalry between all the different courts, and there's secrets that everybody have that the other courts don't know about.
I love me some secrets.
Yes, it's always, and because Faye is new to it, you're kind of learning a bit with her. Although there's things happening that you kind of don't really understand yet, but you will get told about. But yes, it's very good. But as I say, adult content, not to be read even, I would say, by immature teenagers. It's
I do think
it's very much.
It has a huge teenage fandom though, because I did a little bit of fandom studies as a part of my research, and I didn't touch into this, but I did read about the whole Sarah J. Maas sort of universe. She writes a lot of different series, and people like her fans love her, and they do a lot of like fan fiction and fan art and things like that. So she's really popular in the fandom, but a lot of young people who I guess are more open to reading about, adult content, I suppose. But so mine is a very different
I need to know about trees.
So I don't tend to read a lot of literary fiction. I've read a little bit, and maybe I can count on one hand the ones that I've absolutely loved, like literary fiction, and it doesn't scratch that itch in my readerly brain usually. So I just wanted, because I read a lot, I just wanted to try different things this year, but not overcommit. So just like one out of my comfort zone a month. And I started with this one. So this one's about trees, right? But it starts with, like, it's structured in a way, so it's like root, trunk, crown, seeds.
Okay.
And in the root section of the book, you meet, like, I think about 8 or 9 different characters, and it's almost like a glimpse of their life until they meet together. So it's formatted really differently as well. So it was out of my comfort zone, not just because it was literary fiction, but it was also experimental with its formatting. And they basically, all these people have some sort of connection with trees. Like, even if it's a background connection, some of it is much more like an important part of their lives. But it's just like, just different connection with trees. And then in the middle of the book, you see how it's brought them together. Not all of them together, some of them more than others together. But their ideas and conversations are influencing each other. So it's not like a fantasy, it's realistic fiction. And it's a huge part of it is about environmental activism, which is very much about like the tree huggers, that's disparagingly called. But here they believe very much about their cause. But they also show it from other perspectives. Like he writes about it from the perspectives of the characters. But you also like sort of hear other voices and perspectives that are opposing to that, like who think that, sort of human endeavor is more important than forests or whatever, and provide arguments for that. But it's almost like, so the reason that I wanted to get out of my comfort zone is that I wanted to sort of look at the world from a different perspective, Like fantasy shows you, even if the different kinds of fantasy, it does show you that. But I think literary fiction is a different way of looking at the world as well. And in this, it's very much like a tree-based way of looking at the world. You learn so much about trees. I was talking to a co-worker about this who's read it and loved this book. And she's like, I was obsessed with trees for the longest time because, I looked at them differently. And I found that, so I don't know if I love this book. It's a very weird book, I thought, but interesting weird, not bad weird. It's just, and I think part of that weirdness might have to do with, I read half of the book when I was like deep in flu fever, so I was like feverish anyway, so I was like, is this real? Am I a tree? Have I become a tree? Am I a forest? But I guess that's the thing I struggle with literary fiction, is that it doesn't give me as big feelings as it about the characters as like fantasy or children's books or, like things like that give me. But here the character I felt most for were the trees and the forests. Yeah, and that's like, it just broke my heart. And here it talks a little bit about sort of more radical environmental activism as well. But it just made me think of like, it's set in the US, but I know that this country, or the UK, I guess, has like its own experiences of environmental activism, and so does India. Like we had this huge thing, like this women, sort of tribal women, who hugged trees to protect this grove, and it was called the Chipko movement, and I think they were killed brutally. So it was not a happy ending, and it's real, but they were the inspiration for like sort of environmental movements coming forward. And I think it was more like a love letter to trees more than anything else, but also looking at things like technology and the costs of technology and how technology can be used actually to help people coexist with the rest of the world, and to look, like, I think it encourages you very much to look differently at the world that you live in, and not just look at trees as like decoration, but as very important members of our community, and expanding the boundaries of our community. Like, so it's not just humans or animals, but it's beyond. And so I loved that. Like, I loved it forcing me to think differently. And like, so I think the first month goal is accomplished. I read outside my comfort zone and it did what I wanted it to do.
It sounds like a book that maybe somebody who, some of the other books you suggested, the non-fiction books about the environment and things, maybe it's not for them.
Yeah.
But if they're a fiction reader anyway,
yeah,
and if they read this, they would get the goodness of information while also getting a good story.
Absolutely,
if that makes sense.
because one of the characters in this is a botanist and she's written a book, and I think I know who her book or who she is based on because she's written a non-fiction book about the Wood Wide Web. I don't know if you've heard this term, the Wood Wide Web. I forget her name and I forget the book, so this is a useless anecdote. But the cool thing that I remember, because it completely expanded my mind when I heard about this, is that in a forest, like, all the trees are dependent on each other. It's not like the survival of the fittest. They have, like, under the roots and even through, like, the air and things, they tell each other, like, they communicate with each other. So if, like, they're in danger, they send out signals. If they need help, they sort of give each other, share resources with each other. So that's why it's called the Wood Wide Web, which I loved. So she talks a lot about that because she's working on a book, and that book influences the different characters in different ways at different times. So it's exactly what you're saying. I think it's a lot of, like, he's obviously done his research. So it's a lot of fact packaged in fiction, which I think everybody would be a fan of, but there's also, I think there's bits for everybody, because there'll be some characters that you do connect with and some that are just strange. But it's just
like real life.
Exactly. And I think if you're patient with it, because it's quite a fat book as well.
It's a big book.
Yeah, and it's like, I think if you just want to experiment with, or maybe this is something that's completely comfortable for you, this kind of book, it's just a nice way to get to know something else, or like to fall in love again with something that you might already be in love with, like trees. And the show that I wanted to talk to you about, The Change, so that's about this lady who has, like, she's just sort of like discovered that she's like chalk deep in the menopause. And so she decides to like take a break from her life, from her husband and her kids, and go into the forest of Dean to just like for a break. Just a break. And this village that she stumbles upon is obsessed with eels. They have like there's like, she meets the eel sisters who have like a food shack and which just serves eels. Yeah, that's the thing. And
okay, I'm going to interrupt you a second. Have you ever tried eels?
No. I don't plan to.
No,
I'm happy with food. So the reason that she goes to this forest is because when she was 10, she had like fallen in love with this tree, and she'd climbed this tree and spent a lot of time there, and then she buried a time capsule in the branches of the tree. So she wanted to go back and connect with sort of her younger self. But when she goes there, she discovers that the tree is going to be cut and things. So there's like that bit of environmentalism there as well. But also like other things too. So it's like the menopause is like a sort of instigator, but there's lots about community, about trees, about people and how they live with each other. And it's really funny. It's like a sitcom.
I was just going to say, is it funny? Yes.
It's really fun. And it's very short. It's like 5 episodes, 25 minutes. It's on Channel 4. So anybody can watch it like for free in the UK with ads, which you can even actually come to like a library. And as long as you have your own account, you can, and headphones, you can come and use our computer to watch it as well. And it's really good. It's just like, and there's an eel festival. Of course, it ends with an eel festival at the end, but it's like there's a bit of paganism there, a bit of druidism, a bit of like sort of connection to nature, but also connection to people. And like, again, these are all different kinds of people. It's a small rural community, very wary of outsiders, but also wary of each other a little bit. You know how,
Yes.
And it's just how they all still come together for things that matter to them and make room for new traditions and new people, and it's just lovely. So they're all, like I said, enthusiastic about trees and eels.
Did you watch that while you were Jeremy as well?
No, I did not.
It?
So this is clear-headed recommendation. This might be a feverish recommendation, this book, and it's only new. It came out last year. And Bridget Christie as well, just like this book, I think she's weird, but in a good way, like in an interesting way. So like in Taskmaster, a show that I love, like she was super weird, and I was like, I need to know more about where this brain works and comes from. So I was really happy that this show came out. So I would fully recommend the show, I would recommend this book to people who are patient and who want to get to know trees a little bit. And who are just enthusiastic about finding out new things about the world.
Oh, excellent. I think we both covered enthusiasm in different ways.
Quite enthusiastically.
Absolutely.
Yes. So what about next time now?
Well, B has taken a look at you today and has decided that our next subject is going to be germs. She's left it wide open, but germs.
That's actually quite open to interpretation.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, according to this book, humans are the germs. That's not true, but are they?
Ooh. Okay, so your next chat's going to be quite interesting.
So it'll be fun. But yes, thank you so much. This was a great way to talk through my deteriorating health. Actually, I'm recovering, so
excellent.
Middling bit of health. And I can't wait to see what you have for me next time.
Excellent. See you next time.
Bye.